Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Patty Mulvihill. I'm the Executive Director for the League of Oregon Cities, and I want to welcome everybody to this Friday's legislative webinar. I would give a heads up. I don't know that this webinar today will take a full hour. Since we're still starting with the legislative session, things are a little bit light, but that may give you more opportunities to ask questions as we work through our program today. Some things to keep in mind while we will talk about 6 specific pieces of information you need to know today. If there's a different legislative concept or bill that you have questions about, please make sure that you still ask that question when we get to the question and answer session, and LOC lobbyists can go ahead and help you with those as well. If you haven't already done so, please make sure that your microphone is muted and make sure that your screen name identifies yourself or at least the city and the position you hold. That helps staff make sure that we prioritize our members when it's time for question and answers. So for today's legislative webinar, for those of you joining us, we have 6 topics that we're going to cover. The first is House Bill 3062, which relates to industrial land. We're going to talk about LC, which is Legislative Concept 3891. This is a bill that relates to water and wastewater training programs. We're working to try and get you more operators. We know that you need them. We'll do a quick update on the small city allotment program and how that relates to the transportation package. We'll pivot with our 4th item to Senate Bill 916. That bill relates to unemployment insurance during a strike or a labor dispute. We'll talk about House Bill 5025, which deals with the Oregon Health Authority's budget, and we'll explain why we think that's relevant to all of you. And then we'll do our best to give you an update as to where things stand as far as the league understands them in relation to the president's executive orders. So as we've said before, for those of you who are veterans on this call, we're going to give you a lot of information, and we take questions at the very end of the program, not after each individual lobbyist gives their presentation. If you want to get in line fast, you can always type your question in the chat. Staff does its best to monitor who comes in when with questions, and we try and call on them in the order in which we receive them. Full transparency, everybody, I'm doing this from a hotel room from my cell phone. So if I don't see your hand raised, I'll have LOC staff do their best to assist me with this. But we're going to go ahead and start with the substantive portion of today's program. And the first thing we want to talk about is House Bill 3062, which deals with industrial lands. And I'm going to ask LOC's lobbyist, Alexandra Ring, to jump online, take over, and give everyone an update on what they need to know about House Bill 3062 and how it could impact their communities. Alexandra?
Thank you, Patty. So I'm Alexandra Ring. As Patty mentioned, I'm our housing and land use lobbyist here at the League. HB 3062 would have significant impact on how our cities can site and zone industrial lands. As currently written, it would require local governments to map sensitive uses as part of their comprehensive plans and require a new separate public health analysis and hearing as part of the siting process for any industrial use. This would be, anything from light to heavy industrial. We expect large-scale impacts on economic development and community vitality. We understand and share the goal of protecting and ensuring public health, but as currently written, the bill presents a number of challenges. It, until yesterday evening, was up for a hearing on February 12th. It is now up for a hearing on February 20th in the House Committee on General Government, Emergency Management, and Veterans. LOC has drafted a letter opposing the measure. Many cities and economic development organizations have already signed on, and we welcome additional sign-ons. I will put my contact information in the chat if you would like to review and sign on to the letter. Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Alexandra. I'm going to do 2 quick follow-ups if you don't mind. You indicated that the bill is presenting challenges. What challenges do they present from your perspective for our members?
It would make it almost impossible to cite any kind of industrial use. So any kind of, anything from, a light industrial use, which is quasi-commercial in some cases, to, we'll use the example that this bill is specifically looking at targeting, which would be like a truck logistics site, just because it does require kind of a higher bar for public health analyses at siting. So what you zone for your industrial uses you may no longer be able to actually cite something there that would be an industrial use.
Thanks. And you mentioned we've got a hearing on the 20th. Are you just asking for members to sign on to your letter of opposition, or do they need to do anything else?
At this time, just sign on to a letter of opposition. As we get closer, we may ask for folks to testify, but I think right now we're looking at that being a pretty stacked list of testimony. So just making sure that we have everybody signed on to the letter.
Okay, and once again, for those who are joining us, Alexandra's dropped her contact information in there. So if you are a city who has industrial lands and you're concerned about this bill, you can contact Alexandra through that link and she can make sure that your name's added to the list of opposition. Thanks for that, Alexandra. We're going to pivot next to LOC lobbyist Michael Martin. He's going to talk about a legislative concept that he's been working on that will help support workforce development initiatives within the water area. Specifically, as LOC staff have traveled around the state, what we continually hear is that cities are facing a shortage of qualified and certified water and wastewater operators. And this legislative concept, as we understand it, is going to try and help fill that gap. So Michael, can you please walk the members through the legislative concept that's being drafted and how you think it could positively impact cities?
Yes, thank you, Patty. My name is Michael Martin. I manage the Leeds Water, Wastewater, Natural Resources portfolio. And as Patty said, thanks to the Water Caucus co-chairs, Rep. Helm and Rep. Owens, I've been working with their offices and drafting a legislative concept that would effectively pay for water and wastewater operators through a workforce like apprenticeship program. So this legislative concept, there's no bill number, but this legislative concept is going to drop next week, which is legislative parlance for it's going to become an actual bill. And what we are looking for right now is for key members of the legislature to sign on as co-sponsors of this bill. The details of which are going to be in the bulletin, and no need to go through them specifically here, but they will all be in the bulletin. And just high level, we're looking for some members of the Higher Education Committee in the House, and then some members of the Senate. So this is one of our top 9 priorities, and we're very excited. And we've been promised a hearing to Rep. Hudson in the Higher Education Committee. So please contact your legislators if they are on that list and share your story about why you need water, wastewater operators and training folks for those positions.
Thanks, Michael. A clarifying question or two first. Do we know how much money we're hoping to have put into this program, or is that still up for discussion?
Right now it's $5 million. And, you know, maybe a little bit of foreshadowing with your question. You know, I think ultimately there's, you know, this is going to, we keep hearing this is a tough budget year. This is a tough budget year. So this will be a funding question, but right now there's $5 million in that.
Okay. One more clarifying question. You said there's information in the bulletin, but you also mentioned that where you think we need support is from members of the House Education Committee and Senate, a similar committee in the Senate. Is that correct?
Key members of the Senate.
Okay. Can you do me a favor and can you put a link to who's on that committee in the chat so that members who are on this call can identify whether or not that's one of their legislators so they can jump on the phone afterwards and see if we can get them to support the bill?
Happy to.
Okay. So we'll keep tracking that. And then, Michael, once we have a bill number, we'll let everyone know what the actual bill number is.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. I see you're shaking your head. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, all right. And when do we expect that bill number? Will we do a legislative alert, or will we just wait till next Friday's call to let everybody know?
We'll wait till next Friday's call. The plan right now is that it will be becoming a bill next week.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. We're going to take a quick pause real quick away from what I would call legislative concepts or bills and just do a quick shout out for the small city allotment program. Mostly you would usually hear about this from Jim McCauley, LOC's legislative director. He's not on the call today, so I'm going to kind of fill in some of the gaps. But the small city allotment program grant applications are going to start on March 3rd. So in less than a month, that grant application period will open and it will run through April 30th. For those not intimately familiar with the details, that program allocates $5 million annually for a competitive grant program for cities below 5,000 in population for transportation improvements. The grant can be up to $250,000 $50,000 so that you have leverageable funds so that you can make improvements for your transportation needs. We are hoping, the LOC is hoping to grow this program as part of its 2025 transportation package. So the two things I need everybody to know about if you are a qualifying city, meaning you have less than 5,000, is to make sure you mark your calendars for that March 3rd date so that when the program application period opens, you can get your grant applications in. And that to keep in mind as LOC works forward with the 2025 transportation package, the small city allotment program will be part of that package. What I want to do now is pivot back to actual bills that are on, and we're going to pivot to Scott Winkles, who's one of LOC's lobbyists. Scott's got two bills that he's going to talk about today. I'll introduce them briefly and then let him discuss them back to back. The first is Senate Bill 916, which would allow employees who are on strike or in a labor dispute to receive unemployment benefits. Since cities in Oregon employ lots of people, this bill could impact you and your community. And then Scott will then pivot to House Bill 5025, which is the Oregon Health Authority's budget. It will contain funding for behavioral health, workforce development to increase capacity, and money for jail diversion. So Scott, if you don't mind, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk about both of those.
All right, thank you, Patty. Again, I'm Scott Winkles. I'm your general government and human resources lobbyist, and I'm going to start with Senate Bill 916. This is a very concerning bill. You should have seen an alert in your email inboxes prior to this call. We are asking the membership to contact their senators and ask for a no vote. What the bill would do was essentially what it would do is provide an unemployment insurance benefit to employees who are out on strike and or in a labor dispute. The bill does talks about labor disputes. It doesn't say a lawful strike, and that's concerning to us because those phrases are defined differently in different parts of the statutes. Essentially, what this bill does is it provides a subsidy for disharmony in the workplace. So right now, under the current system, under the Public Employee Collective Bargaining Act, both sides have risk when it comes to the collective bargaining process, to reaching an agreement. The employer would lose out on their skilled workforce, their ability to meet the demands of the public, and the workers would lose out on their pay and benefits. That risk helps us get to negotiations and resolve these matters without going to a strike, because everybody wants to avoid that. What this bill reduces the risk to one side in that equation, and we think it would likely lead to disruptions in public services through striking. The lack of clarity in the bill is also problematic, as the term labor dispute in PECBA, in the Public Employee Collective Bargaining Act, is much broader than a strike. So we are asking members to reach out. I think if you've been watching the news lately, you saw that in the city of Portland there was a unit of workers, I believe mechanics. They got to just the cusp of a strike, but that pressure on both sides helped them resolve it prior to any disruption in service. I'm not sure how that would have played out if there was that unemployment subsidy for those workers going forward. So very concerning bill, asking for a no vote. The other bill I'll talk about is 5025. This is the Oregon Health Authority budget. There's lots in there, but I'm going to only call out a couple aspects to it. The first is there's $16.5 million for jail diversion, and so these are services provided to people who are suffering from a behavioral health issue. And jail is not the appropriate place for them. There might be a criminal justice element to their conduct, but jail is not the place that they need to be. So provides counseling, deflection workers, housing, things like that to keep people healthy and towards treatment and out of the criminal justice system. So that's an important part of this. Also, there's funding for workforce development. One of the big hurdles to providing adequate behavioral health care in the state is that we don't have the adequate workforce suitable to do it. So the bill does will provide money to develop that. So we have people both from all the way from the associate degree level, people who might be working in a secure group home facility, all the way up to the PhD and the MD. So big bills, and we are asking members to support that budget as well.
Thanks, Scott. Two quick follow-ups on Senate Bill 916, the labor bill and unemployment insurance. You mentioned that you are asking members to reach out. Who at this point do we need them to reach out?
State senators, and that's we spelled that out in the alert that should be in everybody's inbox. So it got its first hearing this week. Expect it to be scheduled again fairly quickly. So time is of the essence, and so we are asking that you reach out, state senators.
State senators, and follow up on that if I could, Scott. I think you've dropped your name and contact information in the chat. If for some reason there's someone on the call who did not get that alert, can they get that information through you?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then on the workforce development funding piece as part of the budget bill that you're asking for support, do we have a sense of how much money they're trying to allocate for that workforce housing development? Not workforce housing, I'm sorry, workforce development. Sorry, workforce development.
So it's broken up into several pieces, and there's a few grants. So it's 50 million on there's 50 million for a particular grant program. There's additional resources. Some of it's not filled in yet, which is pretty common for a budget bill at this point in the process. So any bill that starts with it in the 5,000 series is an agency funding bill, and those numbers are going to be movable throughout the session. Probably won't come out till closer to the end, but we'll keep everybody posted as that goes. The 16.5 for the jail diversion is really one of those key. It's not a lot of money in the great scheme of the state budget, but it's a very strategic investment that it multiplies its benefit when it certainly for us.
Thanks, Scott. And then just to be clear, as a note, a different staff person, Julie Oak, has put the Senate Bill 916 action alert. That's the labor unemployment bill. That action alert's now a link in the chat for those of you that may want to access it directly because you didn't receive it for some reason. And Scott, just one more unrelated topic. If people aren't currently receiving legislative alerts, what do they need to do to get them? Do you know?
If they're not receiving legislative alerts, I would we pull off of our list. So if you or your city has not forwarded your contact information and email address to the league, then we wouldn't have any way to distribute those. I will also say I will be checking my email tonight and over the weekend. So if you do have questions on that, feel free to reach out. I'll be responding.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. So the last piece that we have on our agenda today is going to talk about the president's executive orders. So in probably the last 2 weeks, the LOC has fielded multiple phone calls, texts, and emails with concerns about how President Trump's executive orders may or may not impact local government. And what we promised last week during our legislative webinar that we would, to the best of our abilities, try and keep our members updated every Friday as to where certain things stand. Now, not saying that people don't care about a lot of different things, but the two executive orders or subject matter issues that have seemed to create most of the questions coming to league staff are relating to the president's executive orders that impact immigration, as well as federal funding. So I don't have a whole lot of new information to share, but we do have some. And in sharing it, I want to caution and remind everybody, these are relatively new executive orders. They've been part of a flurry of executive orders that have been issued. A lot of them are also tied to agency memorandums that are coming out from directors. So there's agency memos that are attempting to interpret and implement the executive orders, on top of litigation that has been filed on several of these orders already. And so we have no formal final judgment from courts. We have some temporary injunctions, but we don't have any final orders yet. So I ask everybody who has questions about the executive orders to please keep in mind that they're new, they're subject to multiple types of interpretation, there's pending litigation, and we have no final resolution yet. What we're doing at the league, just for context, is we have LOC staff members who are working closely with federal partners, be they members of the National League of Cities, the International Municipal Lawyers Association, and our congressional delegation to try and understand exactly what is happening. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the two that we've received the most inquiries about. The first is the immigration orders that have come out, essentially those orders from the president that seem to implicate or directly relate to sanctuary cities or sanctuary states. We do have some new information that has come out in the last 24 hours, not necessarily related to the executive orders themselves, but in the form of litigation. So yesterday, the federal government filed a lawsuit against the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, and Cook County. For those who may not know, Cook County is the county that encompasses the city of Chicago. The purpose of the lawsuit is to allege that the state and those two local units of government have adopted either ordinances or statutes that violate the supremacy clause of the United States Constitution and are thus preempted, that those laws unlawfully discriminate against the federal government, and that those local laws are unlawfully regulating the federal government. That just got filed, and so we have no response from the state of Illinois, the city of Chicago, or Cook County. For those who are not lawyers, unlike me by trade, the supremacy clause is essentially a constitutional provision that establishes federal law as the supreme law of the land and generally takes precedent over a conflicting state law. What I would note is there have been some court cases that were litigated about this issue during the previous Trump administration. One in particular happened in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. For those not familiar, Oregon is subject to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And in that case, similar arguments were made by the federal government, and the Ninth Circuit opined that the supremacy clause was not applicable, but that the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution was. The 10th Amendment for these purposes, and this is like a 10 million foot view, essentially says that when courts have interpreted the 10th Amendment, they interpret it to prohibit the federal government from forcing state and local officials from implementing and enforcing federal laws, basically saying it's the federal government's job to enforce its own laws. You can't compel state and localities to do so on your behalf. This is brand new litigation. It's going to happen in federal court in Illinois, and we'll see where things end up, but it obviously could have implications for us here in Oregon. The other piece of information, we do have a confirmed date. Some of you may have heard through the press that there are 4 mayors, none of them from Oregon. They're from the cities of Denver, Chicago, New York, and Boston, who have been subpoenaed to essentially appear before the Congressional House Oversight and Government Reform Committee to answer questions about their city's designation as a sanctuary city. We will be monitoring that with our federal partners to see what that happens. There are some cities on the West Coast, including one city in Oregon, who have filed suit against the federal government themselves as it relates to sanctuary cities and the president's executive orders. Those were just filed, so I don't have any more information. We're still reviewing what that complaint looks like and what it would mean in terms of impact for other cities here in Oregon. All that to say, there's a lot happening around the president's immigration orders. We are now squarely in the middle of multiple different types of litigations surrounding them. Litigation is generally not quick. It usually takes a while, so we could be in limbo for a while, but we will keep monitoring that one. In terms of your federal funding allegations, so we've been working closely with the National League of Cities on trying to understand how this may or may not work. As of last Friday, which is the last time we got an update from the National League of Cities, it was Friday afternoon after our webinar here. What they are able to tell us that as of last week, the court has sided with 23 attorney generals who filed a lawsuit to block the funding freeze. That is a different suit than the first one that was filed by a series of nonprofit organizations. In the lawsuit filed by the attorney generals, the judge has issued a temporary restraining order prohibiting the administration from taking actions that, quote, pause, freeze, impede, block, cancel, or terminate its awards or obligations to provide federal financial assistance unless specifically allowed under the law, end quote. But we still don't know what that means. Despite that order, as of last Friday, again, that's the latest update I have from the National League of Cities, the administration has not indicated retreat on this issue and continues to argue and defend its executive order in court. So we don't yet know what's happening with federal funding freezes. I'm currently at the Special Districts Association of Oregon's conference, and we've learned here today that there are some special districts who have been advised that their funding is still being evaluated and temporarily frozen. If you are awaiting federal money or a federal grant and you are having concerns or issues with it being frozen or not getting accessible to you, we're asking you to go to the league's website and fill out a form that the National League of Cities is tracking so that we can work to make sure that we all know what's going on. Everybody should be concerned about their federal funding. We're doing everything we can with our federal partners at both the National League of Cities and our congressional delegation to try and figure out what this means. Right now, the key thing for us is to make sure we have all of the necessary information from you. So if your funding has been specifically jeopardized or you've heard that it's being frozen, we need to know so that we can convey that with our partners and work to make sure that happens. That's really the update that we have on those two executive orders at the moment. Again, we'll be tracking this weekly and doing our best to keep you updated. That kind of ends our main presentation. I want to go through with the questions that we have. I've seen some in the chat. So a reminder for those, you can put your questions in the chat or you can raise your proverbial hand. Two things to note. We do our best to start with our members first, since that's who we represent and work for. And secondly, this is an opportunity for you to ask specific questions, not an opportunity to provide comment or feedback. If you have comment about a particular bill, I would encourage you to reach out to the lobbyist whose portfolio that's in. If you don't know who's handling that, please skim through the chat right now. The lobbyists have put their name, contact information, and a brief synopsis of the portfolios that they handle. The first question that I'm seeing in this chat, and staff, if I miss something, please jump in or shoot me a text and let me know, is from Mayor Brian Kutchin of Oak Ridge. And his question is, the small city allotment is the only way we are able to repair our local streets. Do you know how ODOT shortfalls will impact the small city allotment? Jim's not here yet, or Jim's not here today. What I can tell you is that we have been advocating since the transportation package was discussed and since ODOT's budget crisis has been coming out, that allotment needs to retain as part of the package. I don't know what we're hearing yet. What I can do is have Jim follow up, and I don't know if there's anybody on the call, one of the lobbyists, Jim's not here, Scott, Nolan, Michael, Alexandra, do you have any more up-to-date information on where the SCA stands in relation to ODOT funding? If you do, come put your camera on so I can see you. Okay, I'm not seeing them, so they don't have any more information than I do, but what we will do is we will make sure to make a note, and we'll have Jim touch base with everybody if there is a concern. I would say I would expect the state to try and figure out ODOT shortfall, but we've been arguing, as have the counties, that doesn't mean they should touch local funding, because that's how small rural cities and counties handle their transportation needs. So as I keep scrolling through the questions, it looks like Lieutenant Jeremy Jewell of Benton County Sheriff's Department has a question on 5025. On workforce, did you say 50 million or 15 million? I think that's a question for you, Scott.
Hi, there's several appropriations, and I do have a little more information for you. If you'll bear with me for one quick second. Sorry, got all the windows open. So there's the workforce money is divided into several categories, and so it is there's 20 million for an incentive grant program, and so that's helps OHA make offers to and tuition assistance, even some childcare benefits. There's about 5 million for wage increases and some other workforce incentives, and that's part of a federal matching plan. I don't think there's clarity as how that's going to be impacted. And there's another 20 million targeted provider incentive that looks like what it's designed to do is sort of sweeten the Medicaid payment for providers to take on those patients. The 16.5 million was the money for the jail diversion program, and that is a direct appropriation within the budget. The way the budget bills work is that there might be policy bills that create things, but they're funded within that 5,000 series budget. So there's going to be policy legislation moving alongside this, but we'll keep everybody posted as it moves.
Thanks, Scott. The next question I'm seeing is from Mayor Beatty of Milwaukee. Alexander, this question is going to be for you. The question is, we hear that there is a revision to the governor's priority housing bill coming. When should we expect to see that? So Alexandra, for those who may not be as familiar about the concepts of those bill as Mayor Beatty, can you first give a brief overview of what we expect to see and when you expect to see the bill itself?
So I'm assuming this is in reference to HB 2138, which is the governor's middle housing bill for this legislative session. We're expecting to see a number of revisions to the provisions kind of within the bill, starting with kind of the, oh goodness, let me pull up a side document because it's quite the long list of things. Removal of the prohibition on downzoning that existed in the initial bill, changes to the traffic impact analysis provision. Currently, it prohibits traffic impact analyses and kind of associated exactions for any and all middle housing land divisions, and this would change it to potentially be only for developments of 8 units or less that there's a prohibition. There are still ongoing conversations about it, and we expect to see kind of more revisions after the -1s, in fact. And then removal of provisions relating to historic districts. And I think, oh, the other thing that we're expecting is changes to the clear and objective standards section regarding urban services. And I know this is all extremely abstract. This is an extremely long bill. Please do reach out to me if you have additional questions. We're expecting to see those probably around next week, if not the following week. We know that they've had an initial draft back from LC, but it seems like the initial draft came back with some issues and they're having to kind of go back for further revisions.
Thanks, Alexandra. 2 follow-up questions for you. One, for those who may not be as familiar with the legislative process as you are, a -1 means what to those of us who aren't lobbyists?
Oh, yes, that is true. A -1 would be the first amendment and a -2 would be the second amendment. So we're expecting to see the first initial amendment sometime here in the next couple of weeks, that we fully expect that we will have to see a second round of amendments.
Thank you, Alexandra. Last question. You've said that there are ongoing conversations with people about what the bill should look like or amendments. Who is a party to those conversations? Who's included in that mix?
We've had a number of cities included. I can't give a full scope because I know the governor's office has been doing some outreach of their own. But I have seen City of Springfield, City of Portland, City of Eugene, City of Hillsborough, City of Beaverton. I believe I've even seen City of Milwaukee participate in some of those conversations. It's been quite the extensive list of outreach that they've done. If you have not been included in those conversations and would like to be included in those going forward, please reach out to me.
Thanks. And then I just want to double check one thing before I asked you to pop out here. So, sorry, I gotta do my thing. Okay, so one follow-up question from Mayor Beatty. Do you think Senator Meek's condo bill will be incorporated into the governor's bill?
I would love to see that. I don't think so. I think those are going to be separate fights because the condo bill, for reference, would be the condo defect law bill. We have some issues that make it hard to build condos in our state. And this is attempting to kind of solve those, make the litigation, it's slightly less prone to litigation after the building of a condo. They're expecting some opposition from the trial lawyers on that one, so they're unlikely to incorporate it into another package.
And then do you have the bill number for Senator Meek's bill?
Not off the top of my head, but I will go find it.
Awesome. Thank you, Alexandra. Just so you know, there was a couple questions in the chat about the link to the form from the National League of Cities. It has been dropped into the chat, and I saw that the mayor of Tualatin has already done it. So thank you, Mayor, for being on top of it. The next question that I'm seeing in terms of when they arrived is from Jacob Wiley, who I believe is the city recorder for Oregon City, if my memory is serving me right. Scott, this is a question for you. Is there an update on the bill to alter the Oregon Government Ethics Committee's public meetings law regulations, otherwise known as OGEC or OGEC?
I can tell you what we expect to happen. It's not on a calendar yet. So the Ethics Commission testified to their bills on Monday of last week. The league testified with some concerns and put some new things on the record. What I anticipate happening this week is the House Rules Committee will hear some other ethics bills. They're not really impactful to cities, related teachers, school board members, and SCIs, statement of economic interest filings, and the committee will or may announce a work group on these issues to begin, chaired by 2 legislators from that committee, a Democrat and Republican, in which will be put into a room with the OGEC and our partners. The league's objectives, what we have in drafting right now, will remove OGEC authority for everything except for open meetings violations, except for an intentional quorum violation, which is the conduct the legislature was concerned about. It would very importantly add local government representation to the commission. It cleans up some expansion, some interesting expansions of benefit of office and some other technical cleanups. We expect that bill to pop, and I hope should be coming out of Blitz Council this week. But the work group will be where the product is done. This is an area. This is some area where it's there's some nuance and to this lobbying and a lot of technical conversation, but it's something we are definitely working on.
And thanks, Scott. I know you're working hard on this one. Is there anything that you need from our members on this bill yet, or are we still in a holding pattern for them?
I do beg your patience for a while longer.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else have any questions, or staff? Did I miss anybody's hand raised or comments or questions in the chat that I need to identify? Because I'm not seeing any right now. I will give everybody a few more seconds to ask those questions while I do a quick wrap up. And if during the wrap up some pop up, we can stop. Just a quick reminder, we will be doing these every Friday. So please make sure you tune in at noon, but also make sure that you're getting the Friday bulletin, because there's going to be far more comprehensive information in that bulletin as it relates to legislative matters. If you're not receiving legislative alerts or the bulletin, please make sure that you contact LOC staff. You can call our main line if you'd like. Madison, I see your question in there. Let me finish my thought and I'll come to it. You can call our main phone number and we can make sure that we get you added and updated into the system. So please make sure that you do that. The question from Madison is for you, Scott. Thanks for popping back on. Do we have any updates on recreational immunity? And Scott, since we did see a turnover in elected officials, if you could briefly describe what rec immunity is and why we're talking about it again this session, just for context for those who may not be as familiar with it.
Sure, happy to do that. So recreational immunity is a longstanding policy of the state of Oregon to encourage landowners, both public and private, to open up their land for recreational purposes free of charge. And in exchange for doing so, the landowner receives protection from a tort claim. So if somebody should say break a bone mountain biking, they're unable to sue the landowner of the landowner on which that injury occurred. So that policy was called into question in a very adverse court ruling from the Fields, called the Fields case, where the court ruled that maybe this person was on a trail socializing with their friend, walking their dog, and recreation wasn't their primary purpose. So that's led to a couple of other claims. There's a similar claim out of Rockaway Beach, and then there was a pickleball claim where a plaintiff claimed that they were playing pickleball. They broke their wrist playing pickleball, but the recreation wasn't the primary purpose. Fortunately, the court did squash the pickleball case, although it might be appealed. The bill to resolve this issue is Senate Bill 179 in this, and there's the base of the bill will extend a temporary fix we got in the short session, sort of remove that sunset and then make that fix permanent. We're also making some additional technical adjustments. It's also my understanding right now the chair and some of our partners are working on language that would make sure that landowners are and again, when I say landowners, it's all of us, public and private, are protected from suits from electronic recreational devices, e-bikes, powered roller skates, and all those things. So that's what we expect. We do expect the bill to move We've heard positive reinforcements from Senator Przansky, the Senate Judiciary Chair, working constructively with us. It's a priority. I think they know the state needs this. We all need this. The private landowners need this. When that community was really called into question, what we saw was a lot of trail closures, and nobody wants to repeat that.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. And that is, if I remember correctly, that is one of our key legislative priorities this session. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. I would just note that there had been a previous question about the bill number for Senator Meek's bill related to condominiums. For those who haven't tracked the chat, LOC lobbyist Alexander Ring noted that we don't have a bill yet because it's not officially dropped. It's still in legislative concept form. So if you're waiting for that information, please know we're still in the legislative concept phase there. So I'm not seeing any more questions. There's not anything that's coming in the chat in the last few minutes. Nor does there appear to be anything else that I'm seeing in terms of hand raised. So as we close out today, 2 quick things for everybody to keep in mind. LOC Spring Conference is May 1st and May 2nd at the Mill Casino in North Bend. Please make sure that you register for that when it opens. Registration is going to be delayed for a few more weeks, but we are currently taking applications for scholarships. If you or your city needs additional assistance in order to be able to come, we'd love to be able to see you take advantage of that. The other thing I would note is LOC does have some upcoming trainings. If you're interested, there will be a budget training. It's designed not just for finance officers. It is designed for members of your budget committee, elected officials, and city staff. That's Wednesday, February 12th. It's happening in Florence. We also have a marketing, media interactions, and advanced communications techniques training that's happening on March 6th that you can participate in. And I would encourage you, if you're interested or you have staff, elected officials, or committee members interested in those, please go to the LOC's website, www.orcities.org, click on our training link, and you can sign up for those trainings. As we close out today, I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for everything that you do for your cities and your communities as a whole, for the support you provide LOC and its lobbyists during this session. If you have questions or concerns at any time, please don't feel like you have to wait till Friday. You can reach out to LOC lobbyists at any time. I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll see you back here next Friday. Thank you.